right, guys, welcome back to the show. We're on episode 131. I haven't been this excited for a show in a long time. I've been trying to get Dan on here for a minute. He's busy, I'm busy, and we finally connected. He's a gangster in the service industry. Everyone that probably listens to this podcast knows who he is. He's an author. He wrote Branded Not Blanded. He also wrote Building a Big Small Business Brand. So today, he also is a president, CEO of KickCharge. Basically, does all of your vehicle branding as a whole. So Dan, finally, welcome to the show, man. Dan Antonelli, everyone.
Thanks for having me on, brother. It's been a hot minute that we've been able to connect, and I'm glad we finally made it happen, man.
It's cool. I know we're both live busy lives, especially this time of year. It looks like you're might have a little bit of getaway, so I finally got some time from you. So I always ask the first question because I just like to know like what's in like you as an entrepreneur, like what sparked that thing. So if you and I were a sophomore or junior in high school, who is Dan Antonelli in high school?
Oh, wow, that's actually a really great question. We just celebrated our 30th anniversary, which was really cool. And there's a really cool video in case anyone's interested in watching on our YouTube channel for KickCharge, and you could watch basically the whole journey for 30 years. And we interview, a lot of different people, and it's a pretty cool story. But funny thing is, I would say sophomore year in high school, I'm lettering my first home service vehicle as a sophomore in high school. I think it was 15 or 16 when I did my first home service truck. So I came from a background of being obsessed with lettering and hand lettering and actually pinstriping. So I did everything by hand. I painted letters and signs and did a lot of truck lettering. So one of the first vehicles I did was, in my parents' backyard. And if I recall, maybe I got like 175 bucks or something like that, I think at the time. And so I was obsessed with lettering and signs and especially trucks and truck lettering at the time. And yeah, my friends in high school were, hey, we're gonna go hang out. And I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go, letter some alphabets in my backyard. And they're like, okay, we'll see you later.
Yeah. So where does that come from? Like where did it start earlier than that? Like in school? Like
It was definitely earlier than that. Like, my brother was really into hot rods, and he would get these hot rod magazines, and I would see the cool lettering on these hot rods, the airbrushing, and I was like, "Oh, man, that stuff is so cool." And somehow I just got really kind of obsessed with lettering and seeing that work. I was like, "I gotta figure out how to do that stuff." And it wasn't the internet, there wasn't YouTube. It was a very, tight-knit community of people that did sign painting, and most of those guys didn't want to talk to anybody. They didn't want anybody to know how they did what they did. And I could recall I grew up in Staten Island, New York, and I could recall going there was 4 sign shops on Staten Island or 5, and I knocked on every single one of them, and they all kind of laughed at me and didn't want to talk to me. So I was pretty dejected at the time. And then an ad was in the newspaper for a sign painter, believe it or not, which was very rare. And I went and I met the owner there, and he gave me a job. And he taught me so much about composition, layout, the hierarchy on a truck, where the elements need to live. And you could look at our work today, and so much of his influence is prevalent in the work that you see that KickCharge does today. So a lot of the lessons I learned about composition, layout, color theory, were under his guidance. So good friend of mine still, we still keep in touch, bird author. So he actually got interviewed for the 30th video, which was just so cool. Hearing him talk about the day I walked in there and him hiring me. So I thought I wanted to be a sign painter full time. My parents thought maybe that wasn't a great idea. Maybe go to college and then marry up some of those skills. And so I went to college. I got a degree in advertising, and I worked as a graphic designer after I graduated. And I missed working with entrepreneurs. I mean, honestly, I was working for a health insurance company of all things. I was doing their promotional materials and their marketing, and I was like, oh man, I really miss the lettering. I really miss working with other owners. And so I started it on the side, and was kind of my side hustle. And started in 95 was when I officially registered the business. So this is our 30th year. And eventually I had enough work to do it full time. So I quit my day job, so to speak, in 97, and worked out of my home for the first 7 years. And then I got an office in 2007. We were there for about 10 years. And then in 2017, we built our new office, which I guess is not new anymore, 8 years old, but it's a 5,500 square foot office that we basically built from scratch, which was really cool. So we got to design and do it how we wanted to do. So, yeah, so it's been a pretty wild journey to think that 40 years almost of being obsessed with lettering and branding and those concepts. At the time when I was 15, I didn't really know about branding, but I did know at that point how important the truck was, how important the visuals were, how important legibility was. So, that foundation was really good. And I think it also just highlights sort of the difference sometimes when you think about most of the newer designers never had that opportunity to actually physically letter something on the side of a vehicle, take a step back or 5 steps back and look and say, is it still legible? Does it have enough contrast? Does it subscribe to all the fundamentals? And so sometimes designers today designing everything on a computer screen don't have that sense of composition and understanding, because things may sometimes look good on screen and then in practicality when they're executed they actually don't function the way you want them to. So it was really good.
That's cool. And then you went through a rebrand phase too, correct?
Yeah, so
How
when we
was
built
that?
our building, when we built our new building in 2017, I knew that the original name that we had started with, which was called Graphic Designs. It was Graphic D dash Signs, which I thought was clever because we did graphic design work and signs. So I thought, oh, that's super clever. And then I hated it. And so I went through that same, mindset that, some owners go through where they're like, oh, well, it's working. Like, why would you change it? I'm like, well, like, hey, moron, like that's what you fix. Like you fix these problems and now you're not fixing it yourself. Like that doesn't make any sense. So it was a good exercise for us to go through. I knew that the name was holding us back. Um, and I knew that when we built this new space, like there's no way we're going in as graphic design. So KickCharge was born. We came up with that name, and I can say honestly to you, like I think it was useful for me and the team to go through that experience, because I think we have definitely a deeper appreciation for how hard it is for an owner to make that change. And secondly, like we also just recognize that had we not pivoted and had we not changed, there's no way we achieved the success that we've achieved afterwards. So yeah, it was scary. Yeah, all my family said it was a stupid idea, and all my friends thought it was dumb, and even a bunch of employees didn't love the idea of us changing the name. But so glad we did it. Huge pivot point for us. And like I said, we don't get to where we are today unless we had done that.
I agree. And that was actually my follow-up question is like how much of a difference of you rebranding have it shown to you to prove that it was definitely worth it?
Yeah, I think ultimately at the end of the day, you start thinking about, does the brand, does the name, does it represent who we've evolved into? And that's a question for any owner. It's not just something we had to go through and experience. And when we looked at it, we're like, this isn't even what we do. And not only that, it doesn't capture the energy that we bring to the table. And that was a big part of what we thought why KickCharge would be a great name, was the energy, right? So the notion that we energize businesses, like we electrify them, we torch them, we light them up, like that's what we do. And so having a name that sort of spoke to that promise was really important. And certainly with the old name, we didn't have that. Even just pride in our own, swag, like right now, like everybody, you could go to our office on any given day, and probably 75% of the people are wearing some type of kick-charge swag on a daily basis. Like normally, like I'm wearing a kick-charge shirt. You can see my kick-charge shirt, but no, normally, like every day I'm wearing a kick-charge shirt. I remember even how excited I was when we had the name. We knew it was going to be. We still had some things to figure out before we could officially launch it, but I started wearing kick-charge swag like 6 months before we even went live with it, because I was just so excited for it. And I think that's an interesting point too, because you see guys that go through the rebrand process or the rename process, and then they have this renewed enthusiasm about the business. So I talk a lot about that in the book, and the psychology that affects the owners after a rebrand and what that does to culture and what it does to mindset, because they're often just re-engaged, they're just reinvigorated about this direction. And then that does trickle down to all the employees too, which is a nice thing, right? Because, oh my god, well, I see that this company is reinvesting back into its future. Like they're trying to build a better future for me as an employee. And a lot of times too, the employees are generally not super wowed with the current brand that they're repping, right? So now you get a whole new brand. They've got this awesome truck that they get to drive every day. And so there's a lot more enthusiasm about where the company is going from a directional perspective.
For sure. Is that the toughest conversation that you typically have to have with the business owner when they come in, is the name change?
Listen, it's not every company that we changed their name. I think last year we did about 50 out of maybe 250 brands. So maybe it's 20% that we do. And listen, if it's there's different criteria as to whether or not it makes sense to change the name. There's different metrics that we look at, revenue, we look at um, current brand equity, I should say. So it's not the right solution for every single person. But listen, if it's TJ's Pest Control, yeah, that's a conversation we're going to have, because it's very challenging to have last name brands or initial based brands gain any traction. And typically, what it means is that we just wind up needing to spend more on marketing because no one remembers who we are.
Yeah, and that's where I started too. Like, I was young, I was 18, 19 years old. And I was Olson's Lawn Care, which is where it started.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not that it's
I just
when
didn't
most
know.
guys do it and start, they don't know. I mean, listen, I wrote the book because in my mind, I was like, imagine you're 6 months out before you're gonna start your business and you read this book.
For real.
You know how different you would start your day 1, right? So that's why I was like, well, there's no information. It's not like these guys had a ton of information and they still chose the wrong thing. Like no one told them in the beginning, it's a really bad idea to name your company with initials or your last name. Like no one has that conversation. So that was part of why I said, let me write the book because hopefully it can get in as many people's hands even before they start the journey because it's going to save them a ton of headaches later on.
Are you sick of paying marketing agencies and not getting results? Well, we are hosting the #1 step-by-step class on how to attract and generate sales without paying a marketing agency or having a huge budget. Most lawn care and pest control owners get stuck at a ceiling because they're dealing with outdated systems or relying on guesswork waiting for the phones to ring. Our upcoming class this Thursday provides proven strategies to generate hundreds of leads without a huge budget. We'll show you how to build a predictable system to grow past $1 million. We show you how to automate your marketing. We'll also teach you how to delegate and build your team so you have more time. So click the link in the description below. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss this. This is the one thing that I wish I had learned a lot sooner. Now, let's get back to the show. What was the book process like for you? The first one?
I had sketched out an outline too, and it's interesting because the other book that you have, building a big small business brand, took me almost 3 years to get that one completed. And maybe the experience of doing that one, and I had done that one, I think it's 12 years old at this point, but literally, the entire outline for the book and the chapter and the sub chapters within each chapter, I had basically outlined on a flight out to LA when I was speaking at an event, and I had those 5 hours uninterrupted, right? And I literally sketched out the whole outline of the book, and I was able to get this book done probably in about 9 months or so. With the bulk of it, actually, I wrote almost 90% of it I wrote probably after midnight because that was just when I uninterrupted. It was like impossible to try to do it in the office or anything like that. So I literally wrote most of it off hours where I was not going to be interrupted.
And how much has the book itself helped your personal brand?
Listen, it's nice to see people reference it frequently on Facebook and, somebody who posts their truck wrap and maybe it's a really bad truck wrap and someone will say, hey, like you should read this book before you do anything further. Or maybe it's a sketch and hopefully they haven't done it yet. And somebody will say, hey, check out this book before you do anything. And so from that perspective, it's really rewarding because that's why I wrote it. Listen, you make zero money from writing a book. I get that, especially mine, because mine is like full color and it's 200 something pages and it's expensive book to print. And Amazon takes most of it, I can say. So, so you never write a book to make any money, but I just said, hey, the trades have given so much to me personally and my team and my family that maybe it helps somebody. Maybe it really helps them avoid making a couple of really serious errors on day one, and puts them in a better position for success. Ultimately, that's the biggest reward I can ask for.
How many copies have you sold at this point? Because I know it's a lot.
I mean, I don't know, relatively speaking, I don't really think it's a lot, but I think it's like 3,500 or something like that in the last 2.5 years.
Yeah, that's incredible, actually. So which makes you brings me to like my first good point. Where do you think service-based companies go wrong right out of the get go? Like I've seen you post a lot on a lot of this stuff. So
I think a lot of stuff happens day one that's wrong, so then they're struggling to overcome some of those initial inefficiencies in the brand, whether it's the name, whether it's the actual logo, whether it's a poorly designed truck wrap. And so they start becoming dependent on other areas to sort of supplement that deficiency. So, hey, we've got to spend more money on PPC, we've got to spend more money on LSA, we've got to up our marketing spend. And part of it is just because they're not visible in the community and nobody knows that they exist, right? So you really start holding on to the mindset of how do I become 5 mile famous within the community that I'm serving so that when someone needs my service, they're typing in my company name instead of pest control near me or lawn care near me, whatever, right? So think about how much cheaper it is to get that lead when someone types in your name, right? It's a no-brainer, right? Of course, that lead is going to be very cheap for your branded company name. And so when they have some of those deficiencies, they need to spend more money on marketing. They need to spend more money on paid advertising because no one knows they exist in the market that they're in. And, when you look at pest control, especially, you've got the bigger franchise players that are going to be very sophisticated from a marketing perspective and have a marketing machine where they're generating leads and they're on Facebook and they're doing all this other stuff. But on the flip side of that, if you're a smaller local community-based company that's trying to compete, what can we do to really, go against that, to go against those marketing dollars? Because on the other hand, too, in as much as the franchises have some of that machine dialed in, some of their branding is not really well executed. And I think that that's the part too where you have the solid brand, you have a brand name that is sticky that people remember, and then you show up at the soccer game, and then you sponsor the baseball team, and then you're at the parade in the community, and then you go to the home show, and you start doing sort of the grassroots stuff, I should say, that those companies typically are unwilling to invest in, right? So you're at the show, that people came to your booth, you've got a cool mascot that people are taking pictures with. Like those are the things that start sticking in people's minds. And that's typically, one of the strategies is really making sure from a community outreach effort, making sure you're investing in community outreach, I should say. So what are we doing to make sure that people know we exist in the community? And then how do we become 5 mile famous in the process? And sometimes it's just not a question of spending more money on marketing. It's just investing in these grassroots efforts that take time. It's like you go to a show, maybe you don't see the results day one, but you have to remember too that everyone at the show that particular day maybe doesn't need your service, especially if it's pest control, right? Maybe pest control, I need your service when, oh my God, I got a whole bunch of ants in my kitchen, right? But who was the name of that company that we saw at, right? So because I want to do business with somebody I know, like, and trust. Well, how do I know, like, and trust them if I've never seen them in public, right? So thinking about those avenues, I think, the better the brand, the more sticky it is, and then couple that with more traditional grassroots stuff, and I think that that's definitely a recipe for success.
yeah, and I couldn't agree more. It's just all those things showing up, like you said, to all the family functions for the community, being in the Fourth of July parade. And it's Fourth of July tomorrow as we're recording this. Being in the parade in all your markets, having the sticky name, like you said, and just doing like the small marketing things that the big machines like a franchise isn't going to have. And like you said, like some of those franchises are 70, 80 years old and they haven't really updated their marketing. So that's how you do compete. You stand out amongst the crowd, like you said, be 5 mile famous.
Yeah, and it's surprising. You could look at some of the big franchises, and you could look at some of their truck wraps, and quite honestly, they're shitty. Like they're just they haven't evolved, and maybe that's resistance from the franchisees themselves that they don't want to invest in it. But I see a lot of white trucks living in that space, and it just blows my mind. I'm just like like white trucks with magnets, and I'm like, seriously, like that's what you guys are representing for the brand out there. So I still think there's ways to beat them, because some of them just haven't evolved. And like I said, I don't know the reasons behind it, but it just blows my mind sometimes. Like I've got a couple of franchise companies that come through my neighborhood, and I'm just they're literally like white trucks with like vinyl lettering, and I'm like, what year are we in here? Like, what is actually happening here? So you know, done well. Like, and we've done some really successful lawn care guys that have invested in branding. And listen, I'll put them toe to toe with any national franchise, and we'll crush them. Like, we just look so much better.
Yeah, I agree. And then so that's what I would say too is like, like you see a lot of the white trucks. Like, okay, let's not start there because white trucks are just they are what they are. But the biggest pushback you'll get from those operators, like, well, it just costs too much. I don't want to go spend three, five, six, $10,000 on a truck wrap. What do you say to those guys?
So let's look at the reality of that, right? So you want to say, or have the objection that investing $5,000 in a full truck wrap is too much money, right? But let's really look at the reality of what that spend gets you, right? So let's just say life expectancy of that truck wrap is 5 years. So for $1,000 per year, you're gaining visibility in the community that you're serving, and you will never have a cheaper cost per impression than a truck wrap. So you may generate thousands of impressions per day with that truck wrap, and $1,000 a year is too expensive for you to invest in truck wrap. Like, it literally makes no sense. And sometimes it's the same people that are like, but I'm okay with spending $40 a day or $50 a day on Facebook ads or on LSA or on PPC to get my leads. But $1,000 a year is expensive for a truck wrap? Like, seriously? Like, that doesn't make any sense, right? I will say this though, like the important thing though to think about is when you look at the effectiveness of truck wraps, they have to be done in a way that is designed properly and that is branded properly, right? So there's a lot of hate on truck wraps sometimes, and it's it's warranted. Like, there's legitimate reasons why some guys hate truck wraps, and part of it is because most of the ones that you see done are not well executed. So I could see saying, well, I'm not going to spend 5 grand on a truck wrap. They're all a mess. There's too much crap. I can't read anything. I get that part of it. But when they're executed properly, dollar for dollar, there isn't anything that comes even remotely close to the ROI on that, especially if it's done well. But the reality is, yeah, many aren't done well. So I can understand that part of it too.
Yeah, and even going back, 5 years ago when I started back over, there's still things that I would change for brand. But as soon as we changed from green to pink, like everyone said this are our trucks, always. So like, and then tracking that source code as it comes in, it goes to prove like what just a simple change like that can do. We changed the name, of course, too, but like just as we change, like the amount of more referrals and organic search we gained from that switch alone was crazy. And there's still things that I would change about it. But definitely like it's a massive win for us too, you know?
Yeah, one of my clients in Jacksonville, a heating and air conditioning company called Bueller Heating and Air, which happens to be the guy's last name. Last July they had over 1,500 branded keyword searches. So think about that. I mean, he grew from 2.4 million in revenue to 25 million in revenue, I think, in 6 years. He's at year six now since we rebranded him, but he's done it on a 4% marketing spend. So you tell me how you grow to 25 million on a 4% marketing spend when everyone's telling everyone's like, oh, you got to spend 10%. Well, yeah, you got to spend 10% if it's a shit brand. Like, that's the reality of it. But 1,500 branded keyword searches for the name alone, like, what would you have paid for that? With a paid strategy, how much would each one of those leads cost you? But again, he became 5 Mile famous. The trucks stand out. The name is sticky. It's one of the rare instances where a last name brand actually works, right? Very rare example, but it definitely works, right? So that's the part too, where again, when it's done well, and you can live in their minds rent free, that's the beauty of it.
Yeah. Where do you think that like the branding works in like modern day society with online social media, things like that? And how do you track that data?
So, that's the part that sometimes gets a little challenging, even as it relates to truck wraps, because, what happens with a truck wrap or outdoor or even a site sign is people see it And then it might not be that they call right away, but even if they call a week or 2 later, the attribution is typically gonna be assigned to web or digital, when in fact it was actually another source, right? So it's a little bit harder to quantify. Some people are really big on saying, "Well, I'm gonna put a phone number on my truck route because that's how
That's my
I'll
next
know exactly."
question.
Yeah, they like, "How many people call me because I got a phone number on the truck route?" But listen, we're even at the point now where a lot of our truck routes don't even have phone numbers
That's what I
because
was just gonna say. Like, if one thing I could change, I would take that phone number off because they're just gonna Google it or chat GBT your truck
exactly,
or take a
yeah,
picture. You know?
so sometimes the attribution to trucks are not quite as definable, or measurable, but I also know that there's even Bueller in another example for Bueller, like, Bueller was able to trace, like, $1,000,000 in revenue to his trucks because he literally had part of the scripting with the CSRs was, "How did you hear about us?" And he tracked revenue to that, and it was a few years ago, and it was like it was over $1,000,000 in revenue attributed to his truck wraps, which is insane. Like that's absurd. That's 1 year, right? So it is one of those things where brand building people confuse brand building with calls to action or direct response. It's not direct response. Like that's why you don't put a QR code on the back of your truck, right? I know people want to do that, but it doesn't. Again, it's not the way it's meant to work. It's why we don't put a QR code on the billboard. Like you know, it is meant to live in your mind for recall later on. That's ultimately what branding is supposed to be doing. I was thinking about that. It's how do we make it so when you need service, you think of us first. That's the goal.
Yeah, for sure. And like you talked, I don't know how much you want to say this here, but you talked a lot about data as well. Like, how do you extract that data?
Yeah, so I mean, listen, there's a lot of great CRMs which are really helping people understand what the data is saying. So whether it's Service Titan, House Call Pro, some of these other CRMs, and you could look and you could see even the one of the most critical data points that we've seen is as far as a KPI, right, is average tickets. So you look at average tickets as a KPI, and you have many people that perform a great service, but from an outside perspective or from the consumer's perspective, maybe they don't believe that just yet, right? Or maybe they don't believe there's a reason why they should pay you more for your service. And part of that is perception, part of it is salesmanship, and part of that is branding. And you think about again the role that branding is meant to play. It's meant to have people believe something about the experience before they've experienced it, right? So if I can control what Mrs. Jones believes about your company before you get to ring their doorbell or before she hits your website, then I'm winning, right? Because I'm going to craft the storyline that I want to craft. I'm going to have her believe that you guys provide an amazing service and there's a reason to pay a premium for it. Right. So that's typically sort of the wall that guys hit is they're like, well, I'm trying to raise my average tickets and I'm not closing as many sales. And I'm like, well, do you look like you deserve to be paid what you're asking or do you not? Right. Because that's a disconnect. Like the consumer is never going to believe there's a reason to pay a premium for your service if the brand doesn't speak to that premium experience, right? So solving that problem, we've seen guys that have literally changed nothing at all from an operational perspective. Okay, they just simply rebranded. They didn't change the sales team, they didn't change the CSRs, they didn't change the techs. And I tell them, listen, go out and raise your prices by 15%, like day one, and you tell me what happens. And these guys are like, holy shit, like we're closing all these jobs, like no one is pushing back. Like, and that's all what it's supposed to be doing because now we've created this premium brand experience that people believe, hey, there's a reason why there's a reason why I should pay more for this. You look at the in the pest control space and you look at the larger players and the franchises, they've got really slick marketing, but do they actually do a better service? Probably not in most cases. I'm not going to generalize, but so how do we compete against that if they look like they do a great job, but they actually suck? But what about us? So we really do a great job, but we just don't look like we do a great job. What if I can marry those things up? What if I can make it so you looked as good as the service you provide? Again, that's typically where you see the better booking rates, the better close rates, and the increase in average tickets. Like all those things are related. And the other beauty of all that stuff is the marketing spend should be lowered at that point. Right. So sometimes you look at too when people are, well, it's obviously common. Sometimes you want to trash your digital marketing company. You're like, oh, they don't give me enough leads. Right. And then, you can look at the data and you can see what the data is really showing. Like, okay, well, your booking rates suck because your CSRs aren't doing a great job. Your close rates suck because your salespeople aren't doing it. So it's not like you need more leads. You actually just need to solve the operational inefficiencies that are making it so you're not generating revenue, right? So that's what's great about, again, some of these CRMs, because the data is literally like right in front of you. It's just, do you know enough about how to interpret what the data is telling you? Is where most guys, they don't look deep enough into that piece in terms of causation and effect.
Yeah, I agree. We're gonna switch to the book because I have a couple things that I wrote down. In your book, this is what I'm going to read this question so I don't mess it up. You talk about the difference between a logo and a brand. Can you break that down for us?
Yeah, the logo, if you start thinking about um, all your marketing channels and what integrates that logo. So I like to use this sort of wheel analogy, that in the center of this marketing mix, there's a wheel, right? And in the center of it is the hub. And the logo is the hub. Around that wheel are all your channels. So it is your social media, your truck wraps, your uniforms, your websites, your marketing materials. Those comprise that, and that whole piece is the brand. In the center of that wheel is the logo. But if you don't get that logo right, then that wheel never spins correctly. And you could spin a wheel that is not fully round. It just takes more effort. And if we want to translate effort into what it really is, it just translates into we need more money, right? So there's plenty of successful companies with shitty brands and shitty logos. They overcome that typically by overspending on their marketing. That's generally what the cause is, or the effect is, I should say.
Yeah, it's genius. And I told you before we jumped on the call, we went live. Like one of my favorite parts of that book is I always talk about the marketing wheel in general, and it's just hard to get that wheel moving. But once it's moving, it's constantly churning and it gets faster, like it's going downhill. And then you added the logo to the hubcap, like that is genius. I love that. Um, what about when it comes to characters
Hmm.
in the service industry? What's your thought? I know we talk about a lot of that in your book. What's your
Yeah,
thoughts around that?
yeah. So listen, mascots. I feel like they become more prevalent. I don't know if that's because of us or not, but certainly we've done a few. It's always an interesting question to me because people ask me all the time. They say, "Well, are mascots better than non-mascots?" Like, if you're building a brand, like, which performs better? Because ultimately, everyone wants to know, hey, well, I'm going to go in whatever's going to do the best, right? So I thought it was a really interesting question. And so we had realized and figured out that there were 102 companies that we had branded that were north of 10 million in revenue. So I literally went one by one out of the 100, and I figured out how many had a mascot and how many did not have a mascot. Now I'm thinking in my head, okay, I'm gonna sort of solve this question. I'm gonna be able to figure out the answer and be able to tell this to people and say, okay, this one worked better than the other one, even though there's a lot of other variables. But I was just curious, right? And you know, what wound up happening was it was 52 that used a mascot, and it was 48 that did not use a mascot. So I was like, I didn't solve anything here. I didn't have any concrete evidence of one working better than the other. I think it just goes to speak to the notion of, again, you get that center of that wheel done correctly, and everything is going to function better. Not every brand needs a mascot. Not every brand should have a mascot. Ultimately, I think that those decisions should be based on market. They should be based on even naming to a certain extent. Some names make sense to have a mascot. Some names don't make sense to have a mascot. I think that there's a lot of hate against mascots that you see a little bit more online chatter about. And on that particular note, I will agree with the sense that there are a lot of mascots that are being put out in the market. The challenge is that most of the ones that you see being done are really done poorly. So you see a mascot that's not rendered professionally, that the anatomy is not done, that the composition is wrong, that the way in which the stroke widths that outline the particular mascot are done. I get it, because those look like shit at the end of the day, right? So those are not done well. And so what happens is you have these brands with some of these really amateur type mascots that are done, and then it cheapens the whole brand and it does the opposite of what it's supposed to do. So I 100% agree with that notion that there are a lot of really, really badly executed mascot based brands They're typically being done by some of these really low cost, I'm going to use it in quotation marks, branding companies. And so from that perspective, I'm like totally with people in the criticism of those. And that's why I think it's really important, again, too, just as you look at people to do that type of task, just to make sure that they understand, like even just the simple things like the facial expressions of a mascot and what the eyes do, what the mouth does. We have people that have done work for Disney, that have done work for like, really, really impressive pedigree. And they understand the nuances of how to create the emotional connection that that mascot is supposed to do and function. And that's where you see, again, a lot of this stuff is just like, I look at it, I'm just like, oh my God, like this is so bad. And it's sad in a sense too, because it's not going to function the way you would hope it would function. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I agree with you. And then how much should a company's brand reflect the owner's personality versus customer perception? Because like I feel like Tommy Mello is a good one to talk about here.
Yeah, I think, the most important thing to always think about too is any brand that you're designing, your what you personally like, is secondary to what Mrs. Jones likes. And I think that a lot of people get that part wrong. They're like, oh, I want it to be all about me. I want to love my brand. I want it to represent my personality. And while I understand that objection, not objection, that desire, like I understand why you might want to do it that way. However, we're designing a brand for who you're selling to. You're an audience of one. Okay, so consider the market and consider who buys your service and design the
Mostly
brand to
women, right?
appeal to her.
We're
And
68% women.
yeah, and it's definitely more prevalent for women, and to always be thinking about her, right? So you have all the bias about contractors that you're trying to overcome with branding, and you want to make sure that the brand speaks to her first. In Tommy's case, when we rebranded A1 Garage for Tommy Mello, his face and picture were already on 100 vans. So that ship had sort of sailed to a certain extent. So when we rebranded, what we did was we actually made that brand feel more appealing to women. We changed the colors. It was previously red and black, not very premium based colors, and we changed it to red, brown, and ivory. And we tried to make the brand feel much classier. And so there was a psychology behind that, but even though it features Tommy, it was less about what Tommy wanted, and it was more about really being cognizant of who they sell to. We're selling premium garage door services and garage doors themselves, and making sure that that brand reflect that. So I always just say, listen, we want all our clients to love their brands, right? It'd be foolish for me to say, "Hey, it doesn't matter if you like it or not." Like, I want you to like your brand, but I want you to understand when you hire us, our primary objective is to make sure we build something that speaks to who you're selling to, connects to her, and makes her feel there's a reason why she should trust you, feel comfortable letting you in her home. All those things go into what we're trying to do. And again, how do I rent space in her mind so that she can recall it later on when she needs service? So it's one of those things where you think about anyone listening and they have a business card, and they were on an elevator and they handed that business card to someone on the elevator, like what what would they think about the experience that they might get if they chose to hire you? They don't know anything else about your company except what they see in this business card. Like, what do they think they're going to get? Is it going to be cheap? Is it going to be, those are all the things that we're trying to control with that first impression. So just make the most of that opportunity and just make sure it communicates the promise of what you guys can deliver as a company.
That's cool. How did that connection work with you and Tommy? Where did Tommy find you or where did you find Tommy?
So, um, you know, I don't know if you know who Al Levy is.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So Al
Yep.
Levy was working with Tommy, developing a lot of his processes and procedures, and his manuals. And he said to Tommy, he's like, "Dude, your trucks look like shit. Like, we've got to fix the trucks." And at the time, Tommy, thought that it was kind of working okay. I mean, he was at 30 million in revenue, so it's hard to say it wasn't working, right? But he knew at a certain point, after he realized what the brand wasn't communicating, that it was going to be a much longer road to get to where he wanted to go. So, Al had basically taken a picture of his trucks, and this is a good thing that anyone can do. And we recommend this to all our people, is take a picture of your truck and then get it on your phone and convert it to grayscale, like edit the photo and make it black and white and tell me what you see. Right. And that also helps expose flaws, like from a contrast perspective, from a composition perspective. So when he did that, he realized, well, I could barely read my company name on my own truck wrap. And then he had a random photo in front of a garage, but you couldn't tell if they were selling siding or if they were selling garage doors, like, or stonework. There's like all stonework around it. So, he reached out to me, and I said, there's a couple of little kernels of where you came from that I want to pull back in because it has equity. I said, but I can't keep 90% of what you had. Like, it's not gonna move us to where we want to go. And he said, okay. And we worked together. We did a few sketches and concepts, and then I think it was 3 years later they had added another $250 million in revenue.
It's awesome. How do you have that conversation at $30 million with 100 plus trucks and have to invest that much money? Like, obviously, I see, Tommy, like, obviously, was a bought in from right away, but it's still a tough conversation to have. Like, okay, we're going to spend all this.
Yeah. And I think that that's, part of the genius of Tommy is him understanding, and knowing that what got him there wasn't going to take him to where he wanted to go. And that's sometimes an ego thing. Quite honestly, I could look at people's brands, and I could tell them flat out that it's not good. But sometimes there's a lot of ego involved in that brand that they built, that got them to where they are, and I understand that to a certain extent, and I respect that. But I always look at it more from an opportunity perspective, right? So you got to 30 million with this. Like, dude, that's freaking amazing. Like, imagine what we could have done if we had a better brand, right? So that's sort of the notion to think about. Like, that success in spite of a poor brand. I say it in the book, success in spite of a poor brand is not a valid reason to perpetuate it. And it takes an owner that can look past their own ego to accept that fact. And some people can't. Like, some people are like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, and I'm fine and everything's great. And I'm like, cool. Like, that's all good if you want to continue down this path, and that's great. But most of the times, you know, I think those are typically the most successful types of owners that we work with, that accept the fact that they can put their ego aside and know that, what, first of all, it's not my area of expertise. And secondly, like, it's amazing what we've done with this, but now it's time to take this to the next level. Because they outgrew it. And that's what happened to Tommy. He outgrew the brand. Was it a painful thing for him to rebrand, 100 vehicles? Yeah. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's not like he stripped off 100 vans and started from scratch. Like, little by little, we integrated it. And at the end of the day, eventually they were all gone. Like, I was there a couple of months ago and there was still an old straggler still there. Right. So, I mean, I get it. And it's not going to happen overnight. But at a certain point, again, you ask yourself that hard question. Does this look like who we are today? Who we really are? Does this look like the experience, the absolute satisfaction that a homeowner gets after we're done? Because I want to have them believe that before we're done. I want to have them think that it's going to be a freaking amazing experience before we even ring the doorbell, before the CSR answers the phone. And a lot of times, listen, they have to overcome the fact that they don't look like they provide a premium service. And that's expensive. It's an expensive challenge to overcome.
Yeah, and let's be honest, it's not going to ever get any cheaper either, right? Like, if you're growing, you're just adding more vehicles.
The old people say, when's the best time to rebrand? And I always say it was yesterday.
For real.
Second best time is today.
Yeah, and
Because
it's so true because, like I said, it'd be way easier to rebrand at a million than it is 10. Let's be honest, it's never gonna get cheaper. Any like trends or logo designs that you wish would just die today?
I think caricature based mascots should just die. The ones that are done poorly with the really whacked out proportions and the really awful anatomy, again, just goes to sort of that amateur approach that you see. So I think there's a lot of that stuff that is just so poorly executed, and it works the opposite of the way in which mascot branding is actually supposed to go.
Yeah, I remember you. I want you to talk about this a little bit. We have to call them out, but I seen your post the other day about the epic fail of branding with
Hmm.
Jaguar that you
Yeah.
posted.
Yeah.
Uh, where do you think they went wrong there, and why? I mean, they're a big brand.
Um, I I'm baffled by it because it's just so painfully obvious that it was such a horrible idea for almost everyone, in all circles, even lay people saying this is a horrible idea. I just think a couple things. I think it was an agency trying to prove themselves and trying to make a name for themselves. They had no experience in the automotive sector, which is also, again, to me, a huge red flag. Like, I don't want somebody cutting their teeth. I don't want to be the first pest control guy that my branding agency's ever done, because you need the experience to know actually what works and what doesn't work. So, I mean, it was just such a fail on so many levels. I really don't know how to explain how it got past so many people and how that went to market. Like, it's just bizarre. I don't think that they really did enough homework on that particular initiative. They threw away heritage. So when you look at brand equity for any home service company, that is something that has to be considered. Like, you can't just throw away equity, um, to just create this new flavor of the month for them. Like, and I think that that's the part too, where knowing when to leverage the equity is what the experience brings. Like, I knew from Tommy's perspective that red was important piece to leverage. And maybe that doesn't take a rocket science to figure out, but I knew the red was important, but I also knew enough that the red and the black were not the answer to continue with, because that took away from the premium brand experience I wanted it to be. So, you know, even like when you look at naming or renaming a company, you have to really understand what value the current name has, and is it worth it to throw away that equity to do something new. So, things like that, I think it just take experience. I think they missed the boat by not having an agency that was experienced in the automotive sector to begin with, like, which seems bizarre to me, like that we're going to put our hands into an agency that doesn't have automotive sector experience. Doesn't make sense. So it seemed like a lot of things culminated with a really bad idea.
Yeah. What does the process look like from when someone reaches out to you to a final product? Can you walk us through what that looks like?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the first step that we have is a creative brief. So that's, asking you questions about your brand, asking questions about your vision, who your competitors are, and we take that information. We do a deep dive on that information before we have the kickoff call with you to discuss direction. We're going to ask you also brands that we've created that you like, and maybe brands we've created you don't like, so we can get a general sense for maybe stylistically, maybe what resonates with you. We want to make sure that what resonates with you, of course, like we mentioned earlier, resonates with who we're selling to, and make sure that there's alignment there. If there's not, we're going to have that conversation then. If you're into, big hulking mascots that look like they might beat the shit out of someone, we're going to have that conversation and say that's probably not what Mrs. Jones is hoping to see, right? Showing up at our door. So we talk all that stuff through. And then we typically present two or three concepts, and we put those concepts on a vehicle so you can understand how that brand will function on an actual truck wrap. And then we, go from there. If it's a naming question, those are typically going to be chatted before we engage with you. And we'll talk that through again too. So if somebody reaches out to us and they have, a naming challenge, we'll have that conversation at that point and say, hey, here's the pros and cons of renaming. We may want to consider a rename, or maybe it doesn't make sense to rename. So those are all things that we try to work out ahead of time. And then if you need additional support, we can help you with your digital marketing. We can help with your email marketing, your social media, your print materials. Like, again, the thought and the notion is that every single touch point on that wheel will be always on brand if we're coordinating those other assets.
How many vehicles do you think you've done at this point in your career?
How many vehicles? Over 2,000. Yeah, it's a few.
Yeah. What's the next 5 years look like for KickCharge and Dan?
I think that we are really honing in on the notion of, um, one company doing your marketing and zero headaches for you as a contractor. So we acquired a digital marketing company in January.
Remember that. Yeah, I saw that on social media.
And the results that we're getting on the digital side, I'm just so stoked with what we're able to do. So you have like this amazing, beautiful branded website that not only looks great but converts great, right? So I love the fact that we can do all these things under the umbrella, and we can make sure that every single time a potential customer interacts with your brand, they're getting the same message. And so we're going to continue to blow that out. I mean, we have 60 employees now. We've got a pretty aggressive growth plan on where we want to go. But I'm really excited about just sort of being more full service and helping all these other channels that we can do. And we've got such a great team to pull it off. So I'm excited about that future.
Cool. What about Dan? What is the next 5 years look like for you?
I don't know. I mean, I have such a great team of brand designers on staff now. We have 8 full-time brand developers. They truly get it, like I don't have to really get involved in making some of these logos. Like they just do it and they kill it, and it's such a great team. I still love speaking. I still love getting on stages and talking about branding and just trying to share as much knowledge as I can. Doing podcasts like this, like I enjoy this stuff because I just feel like it's such good information to put out there for these owners. And there's a lot of bad information out there too. So it's just like I like even the opportunity to just speak on it. So if I could get on more stages and I could talk more about it, and I'm gonna do a second edition of the book that I'm working through right now, and get that out there. And just keep growing. Like, listen, the cool thing about what we do at KickCharge, and it's sort of in our tagline, is we build brands that change lives. And my goal over the next 5 years is how many more lives can we change? And a lot of the people in the agency came from agency backgrounds where they were working for big corporations, and they never felt the impact of their work. And we literally have a wall wrap in our office with pictures of like 100 of our clients in front of their trucks. And the headline is, again, we build brands that change lives. And on a daily basis, we continue to remind the team of how critical our work is and how important our mission is. And so that wall wrap, I think, is probably the most. We have a lot of wall wraps in the office, but that's probably my most favorite because it's just a visual reminder of the impact that we have in the homeowners, the home service owners who trust us with their livelihoods. Like that's what you're doing. Like you're trusting your branding company with your livelihood if you're going to ask them to handle your branding. And that's not a responsibility that any of us take lightly. So I'm really excited about, where we're headed and what we're going to be doing in the next few years.
That's cool. What do you like to do for fun?
I am a pretty hardcore cyclist. So I ride, maybe 125, 150 miles a week. I'm actually down here at my shore house in Delaware, which is some great riding down here. Just very flat, not a lot of traffic, and it's just really cool being down here, just being able to get out there and ride. And honestly, a lot of my best ideas about brands and stuff come when I'm outside on my bike, just
I'm the same way.
focus.
I'm driving. It's weird.
Yeah, or when you drive, and sometimes in the shower too. But a lot of it comes on the bike, so it's kind of fun.
Cool. So to wrap this thing up, what would be the best advice you'd give someone on their branding if they're just getting besides reading the book? Because of course that's number one. Uh, Best piece of advice you'd give someone who is just thinking about maybe branding, still have a white truck, or thinking about changing their name.
Yeah, I mean, 100% read the book. There's so much content that we have on our KickCharge channel on various topics related to branding home service companies, whether it's naming, whether it's how to design an effective truck wrap. So check out some of those things. And I think it's just really important to just make sure whoever they choose to work with, just make sure they've got experience, make sure they've got success stories, and make sure they got your back. At the end of the day, that's the most important thing that they can look for in an agency, in a partner. People that really have their back and truly care about their success. And for us, that is definitely the most rewarding thing. Like we're excited for Tommy Mello's Home Service Freedom event in September, and we're also going to Pantheon for Service Titan in September. But part of what's exciting about that for us is not necessarily the opportunity to meet new customers, but it's to see our current ones. and to hear their stories and see how they're doing. And they're always just so grateful. And I think for us too, that part is the most rewarding part for us, is just the gratitude that they express to us on what we've done to change their lives. And it's just a super cool thing that we're a part of. And I'm just so grateful that this is what my world looks like, that this is what I've been able to do and build. And the trades have done so much for me. So, and again too, like, anyone that has something that they're working on, if you hit me up on Facebook, or send me a message, or send me an email, it's dan@kickcharge.com. And you want feedback on something you're doing, I am not like a hard sell guy. I'm not gonna push anything on you. But if you want feedback on something that you're working on, or you got a sketch from someone and you want me to just give you a couple of tips or pointers on it, I'm more than happy to do that. Anything I could do. Sometimes it's simple things. It's like, hey, just ask them to make this a little bit bigger, make this part smaller, delete this line, you don't need it. Like anything like that I can help, that would, again, move the needle in a more significant manner for you. Like, I am more than happy to do that for you. So, anyone listening, you just feel free to hit me up. And if I can help or steer you in the right direction, I'm more than happy to.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, Dan. Well, I told you I'd keep you an hour. It's just over an hour. I appreciate your time. Thanks for everything that you do for the industry. And thanks for being here today. Dan Antonelli, everyone. Thanks for being here, buddy.
Appreciate you, man.
See ya. Hey guys, thanks for listening to another episode of Pest Control Millionaire. We don't charge any money for this show, but the podcast isn't free. Please like and subscribe and give us a 5-star review in your favorite podcast app. This makes a huge difference for us. If you have any specific questions about your business or your personal life that you'd like answered by me or any of my podcast guests, please send an email to info@pestcontrolmillionaire.com. And if you want to get in touch with me about our marketing class, we do a live version every Thursday night. Check out our website at pestcontrolmillionaires.com. Thank you guys for listening. I'll see you guys in the next one.